today with a panel discussion. Presenting, who is head brewer from Jetty Road Brewery in Australia. Blake, thanks very much for joining us.
How are we? Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
All good. Thanks for coming in, Blake. We have John Way, who is founder and CEO of Brewlander in Singapore. John, fresh back from a European trip.
Hi, guys.
All right, thanks very much for joining us. And we have James Wu, who is CEO from Rami Brewing in Seoul in Korea. So, James,
it's an honor.
Thanks very much for joining us. And now, so we were having a slight technical earlier, and we're going to see if Conor can join us. Conor Hogan, who is head brewer from Carbon Brews in Hong Kong. Conor, have you fixed the mic?
Yes, I believe so, Charles. Back.
Fantastic. Have you got out and whipped your flatmate's computer?
I just changed some settings.
Brilliant. Great. Well, glad you could join us.
Good to be here.
So we are going to be looking at future-proofing. First of all, what do we mean by this? So future-proofing can be anything from buying trusted equipment to saving that's going to save you on additional early replacement costs. It can be planning your brewery layouts to allow for equipment expansion, to working with software suppliers and seamlessly integrate upgrades with your existing equipment. So it involves looking into the future to project where your business is heading, forecasting future sales, business trends, volumes, as well as potential business disruptions in an attempt to navigate the future and hopefully save some costs on the way. So given that none of us have crystal balls, how can we go about future-proofing our business? So before we kick off this panel session, we want to run a quick poll, and that's to find out how many of you attending the session actually looked into the future. So when you set up your businesses and your breweries, how far into the future did you project your business plan? So I'm just going to publish a poll now, and we're going to bring it up onto the screen. So if you just let us know, so we have an idea, what do people look at when they build their business plans? So panel guys, you can join in on the vote as well if you like. There you go. So we got a kind of so 5 to 7 years is the early mover. Couple of votes that didn't have a plan. That's going out there on the hoof saying, I love brewing, I'm going to set up a brewery. So that's it. Okay, so there's a rough even spread. It looks like most people looked to 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years. So there has been some projections. There's a 7 to 10 years there as well. So looking at the big picture of where we're going to be going in 7 to 10 years. So we're going to end the poll. So roughly kind of somewhere between 3 and 7 years is where the majority of the people projected their business plans to. So let's close the poll now. There we go. So, John, what I'll do is I'm going to bring everyone up on stage now, and then we'll just go around the speakers. We've got some questions for them, and we'll work our way around the speakers. So I'm just going to pin everybody up to the stage. So, John and Blake, James, Conor, we can't get you on the. Oh, we can only get 4 people on the stage at once. So we'll just swap around a bit. So Conor, when we come to you, we'll bring you onto the stage, and then we'll move somebody off. Actually, I can do this. I can pin you onto the stage, Conor, and I can take myself off. There we go. How about that? Okay. So John, I'd like to start with you. So what, in your experience, are the key things that you need to consider when setting up a new brewery to ensure that it is as future-proofed as possible?
In my case, I guess don't set it up during a pandemic. Yeah, but at least for me, I think the best starting point is to think more like a builder rather than a brewer. And I think that everything starts first with the site, right? So, you got to think about a site in terms of does it have enough electricity load, right? Consider all the equipments that you want to buy upfront, and then what you might add in, say, the next 5 years or 7 years, and then look at whether the site can support that with the electricity first, right? Because otherwise, you think that you could support it, but then you make all the investments, buy everything, and realize that you don't have enough power there. Adding power, it's a huge cost, and sometimes it's not even a possibility if they can't add power there, right? Or if the power for the building is already maxed out. So you got to think of that first. And sometimes, even though it has enough sufficient power, can you run everything at the same time, right? Because I think I've spoken to some friends, I've seen other breweries as well, where there's limited load that they have, right? So they can't brew and package on the same time, or they can't do multiple things on the same time. So, consider that if you're making X amount of investment, you want to be as optimized as possible and run multiple functions at the same time, and not say I can only brew or package, or I can only do this and that on one day, and not run at 100%. So I think first like a builder, or at least at the start, right? Or even things like loading on the ground. Everyone wants to add more tanks as we grow, but whether does the building site, does the floor loading allow you to add as much tanks as you want as you grow, even though the space, even though it looks like there's enough space to add more tanks, but find out all these things about structural loading, electricity, even water, right? The flow rate, the pressure of the water, because I also know guys who take one full day, the day before, just to fill up the water tanks so that they can do double batches, or things like that. Like I've got friends who have systems that can do 6 brews a day, but the problem is topping up the water.
Can't fill up the tanks.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
They can't fill up the tanks.
Oh gosh, go on.
Oh, sorry, John. Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. They just can't fill up their tanks. So literally, they haven't tested the water, tested the water pressure.
Yeah, that's right. So I think at least if you are planning to build a brewery first, I think that is the first thing to look at, right? The first place to look at, which is think more like a builder first, and then like simple things. I think it's you should always do is supersize your water tanks, your hot liquor tank, your cold liquor tank, and your glycol tank. So then, as you add capacity, right, it shouldn't be more of an afterthought, but future-proof it that way first. It doesn't cost 2 times more to have 2 times more volume in your water tanks or your glycol tanks. Glycol chillers as well, boiler as well, right? If you can, plan for your 5-7 years or whatever that you're thinking of, and add it at the start. Pipings as well, because many times a lot of these things that you add later, right, we think it's we just add one piece of equipment in, right? Then you realize that all the different modifications you got to do, like re-weld the pipe works, and sometimes it's hard to access when you've got big tanks in the way already. So if you could, even with your piping, tee off, plan where you want to add new tanks or new equipments down the road, whether it's a flash pasteurizer or it's a centrifuge or check cleaner, for example, right? Then you start peeing off and building your steam pipes, your glycols, and everything to run and have the capability or the ease of adding in future when you start at the start.
So get those pipes in the right place. I'm gonna bring Conor in here because you mentioned floor loading, John, which obviously is quite important, particularly in Asia, because a lot of breweries are on higher floors. I know Conor Conor inherited a brewery split over 2 floors in Hong Kong. Going from there, you moved into your new premises, which is the Double Haven, the old Double Haven brewery. I understand, have you been doing a lot of kind of future proofing, getting ready for where you're going to be going over the next few years in Double Haven?
Yeah, I think we're in
Double
a
Haven
pretty
now,
different
the carbon brews.
different position to most people. We started off with 17 30 hec fermenters and a brand new brand, so we've had to like grow into the brewery more than future proof it, I think. And then from there we've just grown into another brewery which is like 19,000 hectoliter capacity. So again, we're trying to grow into that. But yeah, we're dropping in tanks this week, so next week we drop in 6 tanks, so we're getting 2 35 hecs and we're getting 3 70 hec tanks, just to give us a little bit more flexibility in what we brew. Current tanks are 100 hec and 140 hec, so a little bit large for seasonal beers, good for core beers. But we've decided to drop in a few smaller tanks so that we can continue to do our 2 new seasonal beers every month.
Yeah. Have you brought all your tanks over from your old brewery to the new one, or did you get rid of those?
No,
and
we've
start
sold
something fresh.
Sold the old tanks, and starting fresh with new tanks. Old tanks were 30 hec, so it made more sense to just get 35 hec and 70 hec tanks and do full turns instead of trying to mess around doing like 80% of this.
Yeah. And are you at the moment? You're saying you are you're now just growing into the new brewery. Were there considerations you had to take? Obviously, when you're bringing the new tanks, you can't just plonk them in the brewery themselves. They just can't put in the front room of the brewery. You've got to plan where they're going to go. Have you looked at the next step after that yet?
So we've basically maxed out the brewery with this. This is about as far as we can go space-wise with the brewery. But I think also capacity-wise, it puts us in a place where we're good for the next 5 years, at least. We've also put a down payment on a flash pasteurizer as well. So I think purchase-wise, once these tanks are in and once the pasteurizer is in, there's very little else we need. We already have a CFT canning line. We already have lots of noise ties. We don't really need too much else after this, I think.
Yeah. So James, I've not been up to your brewery. What have you been doing? Because I know you are planning expansions now. Are there things that you're discovering now that you should have done previously in the brewery in order to make your expansions easier?
So to me, besides all the technical issues with water, space, and everything, I found my financial side of it, your investment, looking going forward, how much operating costs you need, how much money that you need to run the brewery for the next 2-3 years, how much money you can make, what's your maximum output. You have to consider all this labor costs into it, right? So that's the most important thing that I've been realizing setting up my old brewery, and then I'm incorporating this to my new brewery right now. So what we're doing is we're planning out 5 years ahead. So we're actually purchasing a 2,000 liter brew house. So maximum capacity is around 240,000 liters a year. And then we are considering how much profit we can make with our maximum output and with our minimum output. And then what we want to plan after once we reach that level, where we want to expand to next, and then how we're going to expand. So we are actually looking into 5 years projects rather than short term. So I think money is the biggest issue for us. How much operating money we need for the next 3 and 5 years. Yeah.
And is that a difficult conversation to have with your? How many investors do you have in the brewery? Is it a hard conversation to have because you hadn't looked at that previously, or had everybody been prepped in advance that, look, this is stage 1 of the brewery, stage 2 will start in 3 to 5 years time, where there may be additional investment involved, or have you just?
So as for me, I only have one investor, and then they really don't know the beer market, so I'm leading them on. And post COVID, and people say it's with COVID now, but I think it's market's going to change after this COVID. It's going to drastically change within the next 1 or 2 years. So in Korea, for example, cake sales have went down drastically. So we are preparing the bottling and the canning line. and we are considering who to sell to, where to sell to, and how much we want to sell to each region. So considering all this, I think what's so when you start your brewery, you don't want to just look short term. You want to look long term. You want to go to your investors. Look, I need this amount here for the next 5 years. You don't want to short sell yourself. You want to always ask for more than what you technically need is.
Yeah, you just want to make sure everybody involved in the project is prepared for what's going to come in the next 5 to 10 years. That say, look, there will be at some point more capital investment required into the project.
Yes.
Yeah. And Blake, tell us a little bit more about Tallboy and Moose. Jetty Road. Your Jetty Road. Sorry, my apologies.
All good, mate.
Were you involved from the beginning there, or did you come in?
I'm a co-founder, so I was obviously here from the beginning, and I managed the entire build process for our brewery. I kind of break it down into sort of 3 sections, which is equipment and services, process and flow, and staffing. And I think that all kind of gets led by, I guess, first deciding and acknowledging as a business what you want to be. Are you a brew pub that wants to stay within your own footprint? Are you a national brand in Australia that wants to sell to as far around the country as possible? Are you an international brand that you want to take on? And then after that, probably seeing underneath your roofline and your floor plan what you think your maximum output and literage can be once you know your roof height, your floor layout, all those sort of things. So with what we worked with, we had a certain space, and sort of we figured out in terms of that certain space what we could fit in terms of the cellar and what our annual capacity could get to. And then we worked on making sure that we had services from the street, whether it's gas, water or electricity, that would be able to supply that maximum output rather than re-upgrade from the street, because they're sort of 6-month projects over here. After that point, we sort of went about how we staged installs. So obviously don't necessarily need to get all the tanks all at once. We didn't need to buy both glycol chillers at once, but we could bring the second one in further down the track. Similar with boilers, you can have a redundancy, so you can basically have one boiler and then have all the pipework set up to drop a second boiler in place when needed, depending on, I guess, your space. And then it's just about, tank layout, and from there, your relative flow of the brewery, making sure that you've got good workflow that makes for efficient work cycles rather than working over the top of yourself. We managed a ground up sort of build. We excavated the slab so that we could ensure we had great drainage. Therefore, you're not cleaning after you're cleaning, and we had enough strength in the slab for the 100 hect tanks that we've brought in. So, it was a process that sort of started at our maximum capacity of the space and worked backwards to what we needed to start with.
John, talking about space, you had to change your brewery last minute, didn't you? You had a location ready to go. You'd built your brewery, or you designed your brewery to fit into that first location. When you moved to the new location, you were forced to change where you're going to put the brewery. Did that cause problems, and has that caused problems for you looking forward, or has that been in the end a positive move for you looking forward?
I think like Blake, right? We planned the layout based on process flow, right? So when we found out that we had to shift to another location, we needed to find, number one, a space that could fit the size of the tanks, right? Because it's all custom built to fit the other layout, and finally the only one we found in a short given amount of time that had sufficient power and floor loading and all was about 35% larger than what we needed. So consider that from a business point of view, right? That's every month that we have to pay 35% more rent that at that point in time we felt was unnecessary, right? Or not necessary. So we still have this large, not really large space, but nice space that is empty, that we are not using, that we are right now realizing how useful it is, because we needed a lot of space for kegs and bottles and cans and, you know, and stuff like that. So it was nice to have. So, but I think going forward, you know, it's probably a blessing in disguise, I guess, for us.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, storage is a big issue. I mean, James, was storage something that you guys looked at when you were setting your brewery up?
Yeah, storage. So for me, it's I look for the biggest space I could possibly find at affordable cost, right? Because storage is another issue, and then workflow, foot traffic, that's another issue for us too. Korea, it's really small land. It's like Hong Kong. Not a lot of. It's hard to find big spaces within the city, and that was the biggest issue for us too. So we did consider looking at different locations. Do you want to go in somewhere with a lot of foot traffic, or do we want to go in the outskirts with a bigger system? And we decided to go into a outskirt location with a bigger system.
Yeah, that helps you with the storage. I mean, I get moving to Conor. Storage. Hong Kong is notorious for being expensive for storage. Was that something that when you moved into the new brewery you were conscious of, so that we need to increase the storage that we had at the previous brewery?
Yeah, so we rented an extra unit upstairs. We have like 2 extra units on the 10th floor. We installed a lab and an office in one of them, and then the rest of that is for can space and for packaging goods. But then every week we would order from an external warehouse. We get our malt delivered. Basically, we put the order in Friday, comes on the Monday. Yeah, we have to store a lot of stuff offsite. It's just not possible to store everything on site.
Yeah. Do you have your own storage offsite, or things like your malt? Is that from the supplier? You say, look, you send it to us when we need it.
Yeah, we use Royal, so we use an external courier service. They store our pallets for us. They have options of cold storage or non-cold storage, and then just get it back on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis whenever we need it.
Yeah. Blake, circling back up to you, staff. You mentioned staffing. Yeah, that surely is a fairly major part of the business plan, isn't it? Because once you've built your brewery, you obviously you're not wanting to be spending too much money over the first 3 or 4 years, because you hopefully you have got your setup correct to start with, but your staffing is always going to expand. So that's an expanding cost. You know, it's ever going to be ever increasing, isn't it, as your business grows? Absolutely.
And it can also become sort of your bottleneck for production pretty quickly. We've gone through periods where, you know, given we're a reasonably rural kind of outfit, staffing isn't always the easiest of things to do. So it almost needs to be done ahead of the curve. So, you know, financially, it's not the greatest thing, but we need to get some feet on the floor prior to actually needing it sometimes, in order to keep growing without, I guess, hitting that bottleneck and being constricted by a labour shortage, rather than actual capacity of the brew house or the cellar or anything like that. So it's definitely something for us to consider with where we are.
Yeah. And was that a large part in other people's plans? I mean, James, did you look into labour as kind of a significant part of your future planning?
Yeah, labor was a significant part of our future planning. So for us, you want to reduce costs. In Korea, we have a really high brewing tax. We pay for each liter we brew. I think we pay around about 50 cents per liter on each of the beer we brew. So then we have to consider in ways where we can reduce the cost, and labor cost does play into a big factor of our entire operation. So when we are currently planning our brewery, we are trying to reduce labor costs as much as possible. At the same time, get an easy workflow. So that's the hard part that we're working on.
Yeah. So for some people who are listening, who may not be aware of the cost structure or the tax structure in Korea, the cost of your staffing is actually included into the tax that you pay on the beer.
Yes.
So has that just recently changed, James, or have they kept that with the new tax structure?
They changed Korea. In Korea, we changed the beer tax law last year, and they changed it within 50 years. It took 50 years to change it. So right now we pay by volume, not by cost anymore. But I think it's still considered very high compared to other countries.
And has that change in the regulations changed your outlook for the future as well? Because I guess that there's some things that we can control with future planning. There's some things that you can't control, and obviously a change in the taxation structure is something you can't control. Has that been a positive change for you guys as brewers in Korea?
Yes, it's been a huge change for us, and I think Korea is going to open up more regulations on selling beers to selling beers. So currently we can't sell beers online. So we can only go through a distributor or send it directly to a shop. Selling online, it's not possible. So it may or may not change in the future, but considering all that, we want to be set up and well prepared for everything that's going to come into the future.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to run another quick poll. And this one is going to be, what was most important to you when you were setting up your brewery? So we've heard from our experts, heard what they were looking at when they set up their breweries, what their future planning was. We're going to bring the poll up on screen now. Okay, and let me just bring that to the screen. There we go. So what was most important to you when you were setting up your brewery? So tell us obviously space planning seems to be kind of one of the major things. Can we get any votes through? Okay, can you see the vote on the screen, the poll on the screen, guys? Here we go. Okay, we've got some votes coming in. We've got some smiley faces, so I wonder if that's from the I didn't have a plan guys. And if you do think that there's some choices there that we didn't put on that poll, please feel free to put it into the chat box, and we can see what people are considering when they're building their breweries. So enough space to expand seems to be quite a popular one. And quality equipment, which is actually something that we haven't come onto yet. Buying the best quality equipment to save on early replacement costs. Okay, so we'll close the poll now. Let me just close the poll, and we'll have a look at the results of the poll. So most popular was the buying the best quality equipment to save on early replacement costs. Blake, do you have? Let's close this off the screen. Blake, do you have any comment on that on best equipment?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you always want to sit within a budget as a business. However, I guess a lot of the time you get what you pay for, and headaches and downtime in a brewery can end up costing you a hell of a lot more than saving yourself a few $100 on a pump or whatever it is. So I guess while staying within the budget and the financial constraints of your business, I think it's always best to invest in the best possible equipment that you can get. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to make the best possible beer that we can. So the more that you can, I guess, invest in something that you think is safe and sound and is going to produce the best liquid in the most efficient way, I think it's worth the money if you've got it in your budget.
John, on equipment, I mean, I know you invested in some very good equipment, some of the best packaging equipment in Singapore, I believe you've got now. But I know you had problems, didn't you? So you did invest in good equipment, but you struggled on the service side of things.
Yeah,
So-
we did, and I think coming back to the last topic you talked about which was labor, right? We did that because it's hard to find locals or people in the city that wants to work in the brewery. So we had no choice but to automate or build the system such that we require as little manpower as possible. Not just with the view of saving on labor costs, but it's just getting labor here. Nobody
You can't find the labor.
really wants to work in a factory in Singapore in the boondocks, right? So we had no choice but to do it. Yeah, and for me, I guess after sales service is everything. Like Blake said, right? Downtime is the biggest nightmare in the brewery. Biggest nightmare in the brewery. When you have orders to fill or you need to move beers out, or commitments. The last thing you want is something to break down. I mean, things will break down from time to time, right? So always have some spare parts or things that you can find locally, or keep some spare parts that you could fix on, or have quick fixes while waiting for the actual parts to come. But otherwise, pick a supplier or pick someone that really is on top of his game when it comes to after sales, because you just can't wait on a long lead time to fix a small part of things that cripple the whole operations. So after sales is really, 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 really important. Yeah, and like I think again, like what Blake said, some things really it's worth investing that little bit more as well. And I think once it comes to a certain skill or the incremental cost is not that much more expensive, right? So sometimes if I know everyone has budget constraints, but if you could save on some things that you really do not need, because sometimes as
spend on something
brewers,
that you
right,
do.
yeah, we get very excited when we see shiny stuff, right? But sometimes consider where we can save on and really spend things that it's not just a look good, feel good factor, but things that actually could optimize and efficiencies in the brewery.
Yeah.
For
you said
very incremental cost. Yeah.
Yeah, and you spent on automation, so you invested heavily in automation.
Mm-hmm.
Was it important for you to find a technology partner that could automate with the equipment? That's like so you're running the technology, the software and the hardware, they can integrate well together. Was that all one company, or did you find a couple of companies that could do it and could work together to integrate your software and hardware?
Yeah, we went with separate companies. I probably was a little bit more hands-on with the feed up, and because given that I started in home brewing, right, and when I first started, like I don't know, 13 years ago, there was nothing that was ready-made, so everything was pots and pans and DIY everything, right? So again, like we were building with a budget, and it's all about saving as much as we can along the way. So we piece together certain stuff. For example, like buying conveyors, we bought our conveyors from Taiwan at probably half the price, or maybe 60% of the price if we got it from Europe, who might have just OEM out of Taiwan anyway, right? So we when we plan, we get them talking to each other as well, right? So then the guys that's building the depalletizer would be the talking together with everyone, so the whole line or the whole system is synced up, running at the same output, and not have one that's running faster than the other, and and also I wouldn't really recommend that if you don't really know what you're doing, or not have a consultant, but we're just trying to save some cost there.
It's important to do your homework to make sure that you're working with suppliers who work together, or are able to work together, can have a good relationship because in the future you're going to need the money. You've got their equipment, you've invested in their equipment on site, whether it's a software equipment, whether it's a hardware equipment, but you're going to need them in the future to talk together if you have problems in the brew house. Right. So Conor, with your old brew house, was that ready for the future, or did you see that we just got to go and buy a new brewery? So this is why you then brought the new brewery.
Yeah, just the ground floor 10 floor dynamic does not work in a brewing.
Yeah,
does not work in the brewing world.
One.
You have to CIP 3 tanks every time you do a brew day, transport them into an elevator, carry them upstairs, wait 2 hours for an elevator. If there's a typhoon, can't get the elevator. If you've already mashed in, elevator breaks. So many things that didn't work in the old brewery. So yeah, ground floor brewery with everything on the same site definitely works. And then from a packaging side of things, we were running a Wild Goose, which is fine, but very, very limited in what you can do with your output. So upgrading to a CFT is pretty nice. We can package like 9,000 cans an hour. It's an amazing machine. But yeah, definitely echo John's sentiments of like after service. If there's an issue, if there's a breakdown, like CFT, if something happens in the CFT in August, you're screwed. Italy does not answer the phone in August. That is their holiday month. So if something happens to your CFT, first of all, it's the wrong hours. You got to stay at work till like 8 or 9 p.m. just to get an answer from them. If it's August, probably not going to get an answer. So really, really helps if you have somebody who knows their stuff on an engineering / fixing things, but also very, very hard to find in this industry, I think.
Or just don't package beers in August.
Yeah, just don't package August. Maybe we should shut down as well for a month.
Yeah, everyone go on holiday in August as well. So I mean, how would you find out about after sales service? I mean, is it just it's purely by talking to other people in the industry or talking with consultants, or how would you know? Because I know, like you say, you have a European piece of equipment, something goes wrong, Europe is on holiday. It's so hard to get hold of them. How can you find that out in advance?
I would never buy a piece of equipment until I get first-hand information from somebody else who's already dealt with that supplier. Like the brewing industry is super, super open. You can go to anybody, even if it's a competitor who's going to you're going to open up next to them. I think it's a very, very open industry. People will give you very, very honest answers on what not to do. The mistakes we made, definitely don't do this, should do this. Definitely ask around, ask as many people as possible. We're very, very lucky. It's open industry. People are super nice.
Oh, it's great. That's why we can do panels like this, because you guys are willing to share your experience to help other people to float the industry, which is fantastic. James, would you echo those comments? Talk to people in the industry. I mean, how easy is it for you to choose who you were going to go with your upgrades? Did you know people who'd used them before?
We haven't decided which canning or bottling system that we want to go with. So I'm still asking people in the industry, getting their feedbacks, what to look for, and then after service. I think it's a huge thing that we have to consider, because we do not have an engineer. So if anything goes wrong with the system, then like Conor said, we need someone to fix it. So after service is something that we're considering right now. Costs too, and maximum output, because canning and bottling system, once we buy, we're looking into 3 to 5 years. We're going to be sitting with the system for a very long time. So a lot of consideration to things to consider before we purchase the equipment. And I'm talking to a lot of people right now.
I would suggest something from our experiences. If you are looking to buy anything or upgrade anything right now, try to check, especially what kind of equipment, right? If it needs a lot of commissioning and on-site installation, find out if you could actually get the installers in, because we had a horrible time, because until today we couldn't get a lot of them in. So we had to do a lot of commissioning through Zoom, and it wasn't ideal. So I think it's something to think about.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing. Another thing we need to consider when we're talking about future proofing is how much can you future proof? I mean, who saw the pandemic coming? How much can you actually do? That's within your control. Blake, what's in your control and what's out of your control? How do you decide what you need to worry about?
Look, it's a good question. I think it's almost like licking a finger and sticking it in the air. It's a balance between ensuring you're not over investing just because you've got space or money in the budget, but also ensuring that you've set yourself for the growth that you want to achieve. So sometimes you can shoot the lights out and exceed your 5-year plan in 3 years. And it's one of those things, you pat yourself on the back and start to solve those problems that arise because you've outgrown your 5-year plan. And ideally that means there's some capital in the budget to invest in solving those problems anyway. But you also want to make sure that you don't overcapitalise, because if things don't go exactly the way that you're hoping in your 5-year plan, you also don't want to be in a position where you've got overheads and expenses that you don't meet. So I think it's a bit of, 1 foot in one camp and 1 foot in the other. And that's where I guess budgeting and the finance that James has been talking about with the setup of his brewery is really important, just ensuring that you're, I guess, covered in both directions to a degree.
So you are ready for every eventuality. So you've got a little bit of your spare cash there, just in case things like this happen. So a global pandemic hits, you've got to subsidize your rent somehow. Maybe you're not making producing the volumes or selling the volumes that you initially thought you'd need. So having that cash reserve seems to be a very important thing to make sure you've got enough to see you through the things you can't see. Sorry, excuse me. So we got a comment from Gavin coming in saying, I'd say cash flow. So I guess cash flow is the most important, and the level of automation. So I guess cash flow and reserves are two very different things. With cash flow, you've got to make sure that you are producing your volumes, you're selling your volumes. So your sales team. We decided for this discussion that we wouldn't move so much into a brand future proofing and say brand and sales.
Sorry, Charles, I think you're breaking
Yeah,
up.
Charles, definitely breaking up.
Yeah, Charles, we're losing you a bit. Maybe restart the audio for a second. It's like coming through and very broken. I'm just going to turn off your audio for a second, Charles. I'm just turning so everyone can. Let's see. Sorry, everyone. Give us a sec. Okay, that sounds better. Oh no.
Maybe do away with the Bluetooth and see if your
Yeah.
laptop's mic and speakers work.
Let's try.
If you just change your audio video settings, the input for the headset. So let's see the poll results while Charles is just fixing up his audio. So we've 8 votes so far in terms of do you expect to upgrade or expand your brewery in the next 2 or 3 years. We've got 75% voting yes, and 25% saying they will outsource the extra brewing when production exceeds my brewery's capacity. So that's pretty cool. That there's a lot of people looking to expand their brewery. I guess let's see if we get any more votes, and I think that's the result. There we go. Some more votes coming in. So everyone get your votes coming in. We still have a couple more people to vote from the panel. Okay, now that's equalizing it, but I must say I was quite surprised to see so many people were talking about expansion.
Hi, Ollie, can you hear me now?
Yep, that's working a lot better, Charles. Perfect.
Right. Right. So sorry about that. Sorry about that, everyone. It's slight technical. Yeah. So we're just a quick poll there to see who is planning expansion. So it looks like everybody's expecting a pickup in the coming years. So there we go. Okay. So outsourcing my extra brewing. I mean, that's becoming quite a regular, quite a common thing in Asia now. It seems to be a bit of a trend developing in the brewing world. Johnny, are you seeing people coming to you? Because you've got a fairly large brewery, haven't you? You set up quite a large facility, obviously, for the future. Are you seeing that people are coming to you for either expanded capacity or for just to brew with you at the moment?
Yeah, we're seeing a bit more inquiries, but I think because for a lot of new people trying to get into this, right? Our brew house is 30 hectares, so it's a little bit bigger. But I guess a lot of people are coming to us mainly because of the packaging line that we have. Yeah. So, but we're seeing some increase in inquiries, but at the same time, we are not excessively taking too much in, because the first 6 months was actually dialing in the system, and we had some challenges there, right? So for us, it's about getting confident ourselves first in the system, making most of the mistakes ourselves before we want to be open to make beers for other people.
Yeah. So was this part of your plan for the future, was to brew for other people, or are you just using that to fill your excess capacity at the moment while you expand into your brewery?
There was a plan 2 years ago, and then there's a plan.
Has everybody found that you had your plan?
Yeah, but I guess for us, we were always open to brewing for others as well, because I started first as well as a gypsy brewer, right? So I guess a lot of that is also giving back to the community, to the ecosystem, and I guess for us as well, it's not just about providing a facility, but we could actually help to coach and share some valuable inputs of how we also started first as a gypsy brewer and things like that, and advise some of them as well, I guess.
Yeah. I think we'll excuse me. We'll wrap up the panel session in a minute, because I know you guys are busy. You got lots to do today, I'm sure. Connor's back working and talking with his Italians, and they're back from their holiday. What advice would you have for breweries now? So at the moment, many breweries will be emerging fairly cash strapped from the pandemic. How can they go about future proofing if there isn't a budget to future proof? So Blake, do you want to have a stab at this? Yeah, what can you recommend to people who are either they're setting up their brewery now, they've realized that look, the economy isn't what I thought it was. Maybe they haven't been able to get the investors that they'd expected. Can they? They can't buy a property, or they can't rent a property as big as they thought they could. They may not be able to invest in the equipment they thought they could. Are there things they can do now which is going to help them for the next 3 to 5 years?
Look, if you're a brewery that's already operating and you want to expand and don't have the capital to do so, I think there's starting to be products and process aids on the market that can actually, I guess, increase your yield, reduce tank residency, things like this that can increase your volume output incrementally whilst you get back on your feet and get, I guess, beer sales pushing through again. And I guess then ideally get some money back in the bank to invest in equipment going forward. But I guess education on getting ferments through clean and fast and increasing your yields of liquid per brew in order to, I guess, increase your capacity and future-proof your brewery with minimal financial input, I guess.
Yeah. And when you say products on the market, are you talking mostly on process aids as opposed to buying additional equipment?
Yeah, look, if you're purely down to cash flow and you don't have a capex in your budget and there's no money to really be throwing around, I'd be looking at ways that you can increase your yield on your beer in order to, I guess, increase your capacity in that way, and increase your production capabilities through minimal expenses of process aids rather than capital expenditure projects that typically cost a fair bit in this industry. So I guess every little bit can help, and the smaller wins that you can get will continue to translate even once you increase the capacity overall as well.
Yeah, and that'll help with your cash flow, which Kevin was talking about. Boom, cash flow comes in, then you can afford to buy more equipment, you can afford your expansion.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's a short-term fix to a long-term problem. But if you can focus on things that, small increases can, I guess, get you back up and running and flowing after such a unpredictable 12, 18 months.
Yeah. And James, you are currently undergoing an expansion.
Yes.
How have you managed, the last year and a half, 2 years, before, as you reach your capacity, what have you been doing to maximize your output?
Well, so before the expansion during the pandemic, I had to rely most of my sales on keg sales, right? And keg sales, that was really hard. It was brutal for the last year and a half. And so I planned ahead. Do I want to continue this, or do I want to look for investors? So what I did was I had to cut the labor cost, and then I had to I only focused on brewing stuff that's gonna help me survive for the next year and a half. So minimize my losses, but so minimizing my loss was a big part, and I had to consider looking into cheaper malts, and then going into maybe just buying 2 or 3 hop varieties and stuff like that. Yeah.
So you, I mean, in a strange way, the pandemic has helped you. I mean, in a very strange way, but you haven't had the problem of your brewery has now reached its full capacity. You can't do anything else. So expanding because your brewery has already reached capacity. You are planning what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Going, okay, well, we need to expand now, because what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years is we've got to be ready for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we are expanding in ways where we can, like pandemic. No one saw this coming, and then in Korea, the laws might change again. So we want to be well prepared for that, and that's where we are investing. Actually, it might not be worth it within the next year or two, but then just in case something might happen, we want to be well prepared for that.
Yeah. So it's looking into the future. Going, okay, well, this is where the market is going to go.
Yes.
Yeah. So Conor, you're saying you're bringing in more small tanks.
Yes.
Have you guys looked into the future and said, look, okay, our barrel program is going to become more popular. People are going to be drinking more aged beers or more sour beers. And have you kind of put your money there and said, okay, this is where the market's going?
Yeah, I think we just need a little bit more flexibility. So we already contract brew for probably 5 clients as it is. And 35 to 70 hec is about the limit of what most of these breweries want for first time out. We're hoping they'll grow into the larger capacity and the larger tanks. But right now, yeah, we just need some slightly smaller tanks. 70 hec is quite a lot of beer to get rid of in Hong Kong. 140 is a really, really lot of beer to get rid of in Hong Kong. So yeah, we just needed some smaller tanks to give us a little bit more diversity.
Okay. Well,
yeah, definitely see the barrel and sours growing as well.
Oh yeah, you're seeing a big market there. Are other guys seeing those growth in that market around the region? Blake, are you? I'm not sure what kind of beers you brew at Jetty Road. Do you see sours growing? Is that part of your program?
Yeah, so obviously, sort of Ketter sours in Australia, given the warmer weather, typically over summer, really big upswing. So we probably increase our sour brewing by about 50% over the summer period. So they're definitely, in the last couple of years, really increased across Australia. I know one of the breweries locally that becomes about 30% of their production in total. So
a big pickup.
Yeah.
So quick plug for our later session today at 4:00. We have Fermentis, who will be presenting on kettle sours, and they'll be talking about kettle souring parameters and how that affects the final brew. So little segue there. John, are you seeing sours pick up in Singapore? Is that part of your vision for the brewery, or what are your thoughts on the market?
To be honest, I don't see that big growth actually. No, I think a couple of years ago, yes. Then after that, everyone just got into your hazy IPAs, and we actually saw a slowdown in sours for a bit. And it's really still a niche for sour beers. So there are a lot of sour stuff I want to do, but I don't think we are probably ready for that at this moment. Yeah.
And do you see? I guess Singapore, there's a fairly stable year-round market, isn't there? Because the weather doesn't change, so you don't have your heavies in the winter and your lighter, more refreshing beers in the summer. It's summer every day. So do you focus on those lighter, easy drinking beers?
I guess so. Given that 90% of beer drinkers here are still drinking commercial lagers, right? So I think the palate is still more used to something dry, crisp, light, not too flavorful. But we're starting to see more of them starting to like hoppier stuff. At least I'm talking more about the mainstream people, right? So IPAs, everyone loves IPAs. So at least where we are right now, yeah. And it's quite funny because in our parts of the world we have so many preserved foods, right? But when it comes to beer, it's why is this beer sour? So, but hopefully we start to see a little bit more change in that. Yeah.
And James, finally down to you, James. You see a swing, wouldn't you, from winter to summer? The different changes in the flavors of the beers people are looking for.
Oh yeah, there's I feel like demand for sours and hazy IPAs has definitely gone up in Korea, but we're only talking in major cities in Korea. But in the smaller cities, people still mostly prefer easy lagers, right? So I think how you market the product, storytelling is a big part of the selling point, because eventually you want to sell the beer you brew.
Yeah. And have you looked at the market and said, look, okay, maybe I like sours or I like barrel aged, but this is what's popular on the market and it's lagers, so that's going to be the focus of the new brewery that you're putting in?
No, actually, lager is not our focus. We are eventually going to go for try to boost our sales in hazy IPAs and IPAs and sours. But lager is going to be the bridge between those gap. It's going to be like introduction beer.
Yeah. Just have a one there to help the non-craft guys move into craft.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, thanks very much, guys. I appreciate you spending your time and sharing your insights with us. I think for people engaging in a new brewing journey, setting up a new brewery, it's invaluable advice to help them as they consider what they're going to take on with their equipment, their layout, staffing. I think is a very important thing as well, which you guys have mentioned. We appreciate the time that you spent. Thank you to our panel, to John, to Conor, James, and Blake. Thank you for taking the time with us today to share your experiences. Thank you to our session partner, Bespoke Brewing Solutions. And thank you all for joining us. We're going to bring this session to an end now. We'll be back at 2:00 Singapore time with Stefan Recker from Hopsteiner. And he'll be looking at 6 ways to save money on hops and still brew amazing beer. So I guess that's something, James, something you've been doing is you've been looking at saving on your raw materials over the past year and a half, getting ready for your expansion.
Yep.
Yeah. And later, as we mentioned, we have Krishna and Simon from Fermentis. They'll be talking about kettle souring parameters and the impact on fermentation. And finally, our last session of the day will be 6:00. Felix Berberg from Steinecker will be with us talking about energy efficient brewing for the future. So thank you very much, guys. Appreciate your inputs. Some fantastic insights you've shared with us today. And thank you everyone for joining in.